It's pretty funny. We actually call him the GOAT at the club. We just think he's the best. He's been able to do what he's done for such a long time. I think he's tough inside. He gives a lot of the boys like Walshy and Doc on the outside a little bit more with some really good looks. So, yeah, it's good to see him playing some good footy.
This is the GOAT that Ollie was talking about. I mean, how could I not take Ollie's comment seriously? Look how locked in this guy is pre-game. Nah, but all jokes aside, if we use the term unironically, George Hewett may not be the greatest of all time, but he definitely is Carlton's greatest of the season so far. I mean, this guy has silently achieved for years. Here's some hard hitters for you. George places in the top 5 at the club in all these categories, but let's pay close attention to his ball winning ability in the contest, his tenacity, and his ability to gain territory for the Blues. In essence, George embodies exactly what Michael Voss wants in his players, and I think this was quite noticeable on the weekend against North Melbourne. Hewett was amongst the best in the majority of these categories, and that has him as the subject for this week's analysis. What has been most profound about his game relates to a comment by Michael Voss that stuck with me. A few weeks back, Voss talked about the inability to cope with pressure. George Hewett, I think, has been consistently clean and strong, giving Carlton an advantage as they reap the rewards on the outskirts of the contest. Basically what Ollie Hollands was alluding to, and that's what was on display on the weekend. This ability to remain composed and stable even in light of pressure. What also stands out is his availability. He doesn't necessarily work into overdrive to get to every contest, but it seems like he's always available as an option for Carlton to link things together. The other thing that really strikes me about George's game is his ability to be highly productive, which we'll get to in a moment, all the whilst being highly attentive towards the opposition's better midfielders. See example Luke Davies-Uniacke on the weekend. This aligns with this comment by Jordan Lewis pre-game.
They need to bully them, to be honest. They need to really scar this midfield side from North Melbourne because someday they'll be good and they want these memories to last forever.
Look, I think George was a pioneer of the terrorising Carlton inflicted on North Melbourne. George's genuine ball-winning ability and clearance, which had him collect 21 touches, 12 of those contested, 9 clearances, 5 centre clearances, 5 inside 50s, and 4 score involvements by half-time, that played into another key statistic for the Blues. Not only did Carlton kick 12 goals from clearance, but Carlton's forward half pressure was consistently strong. Beyond a 27 tackle advantage overall, they had 23 forward 50 tackles to 8, kicking 94 points from the forward half as a result. More specifically, 6 goals were scored from forward 50 turnover and 4 from forward 50 stoppage, majorly contributing to a second half scoring avalanche. With Hewett aiding Carlton at the coalface like there was no tomorrow, he was instrumental in ensuring this element of the game came into play, aiding in the advancement of the ball up the field. Let's dive into some examples which show off his impact the most and speak to these observations the most. I found that at stages, Carlton were far more spread out on centre bounce setup in comparison to the earlier rounds, and soft drops at the centre circle were allowing Carlton to collapse towards the drop zone and then attack the open space as numbers were drawn in. Hewett was a beneficiary, like on this early example where Hewett starts attacking side, takes initiative, and then as he gets by Sheasel, Carlton can maximise that extra number, and Hewett uses Cripps as a means to find himself on the perimeter. And this is a nice lowering of the eyes in comparison to the more stock standard high and long kick on the defensive side of the stoppage that we usually see. Hewett then follows up on that short pass and collects the footy with Sheasel protecting the corridor side. And this kick is a superb delivery to Curnow, which ends up opening Carlton's account. Hewett was instrumental in this passage. Here's another example where Hewett enters from the attacking side, collects the soft drop to feed the perimeter, and then Carlton are able to feed the front of the stoppage as Chera catches Parker napping. Then you get that forward 50 entry and Carlton's pressure is on show, all culminating to a forward 50 stoppage. And on this example, it's not necessarily Hewett impacting with ball in hand, but in fact, he's working cohesively with his partners in crime. Hewett deviates right, Cripps adopts Cerra's positioning to complement that, which has been a combination that's worked for a setup like this. However, it serves as a decoy with Parker and Davies' Uniac sucked away from the space Cerra will run into. The tap perfectly complements the run, and with two North players flat-footed in comparison, Cerra can break. That's not a great kick, but with North Melbourne's defenders doing this shit all afternoon, a kick to the top of the square couldn't be any more dangerous, with this being the outcome. On this example, we see a portrayal of that George Hewett composure in close to help feed the perimeter. First, it's the tackle application which places Hewett in this position for possession, a staple of his game this year. Given Cripps has left the area darting forward, and Walsh was already on the back of stoppage, this means it's Hewett's basic responsibility to succeed in this matchup, and Carlton will be benefited as a result. He sees a gap, Walsh is benefited on his right side, and Hewett is able to pass to advantage. With Carlton's halfback a spare at the stoppage, and space on either side of him, Carlton can get this ball cleared and into their potent attacking zone, even though the disposal isn't a high percentage one. And this is what I allude to with his availability. The play isn't necessarily moving quickly, but he'll find himself involved on a wing contest with a big part to play. Lewis Young had an equally instrumental role to play in eliminating his direct matchup from the sequence, because now it's a 2-on-1. All Young needs to do is capitalize on the Hewett availability, and that's when these guys fronting up to goal can blitz on by as they find themselves goal side of their opponent. Hewett's availability maintains the flow of the attack, as without him, Cripps can't clear out, the play slows, this North player probably gets involved and numbers collapse, killing the freedom of the attack. And with Hewett's presence, Powell had to pressure him, meaning that whilst it's a bit of a shithouse, at the pointy end of this attack, Paddy Cripps has enough time to compose himself on the left and kick a goal that simply should not be allowed. Something of a similar dynamic works later in the second quarter, which helps Carlton gain distance and creates an opportunity for Carlton's pressure to apply itself. On this fourth quarter example, Carlton switched the play, and Hewett's not necessarily working harder, but working smarter, going through the corridor as he anticipates and tracks the play. Then he switches gears to gain an extra meter as Carlton go inboard, and he just happens to be in the right place positionally as a Walsh lead helped him lose Davies' Uniac. It's a simple pick up and collect, turning into a handball to Motlop, as he also lost his man on the forward 50 entry. Having George present made this look easy. Speaking to his availability again, in this example, Hewett actually concedes a free kick to George Wardlaw, who far and clear was North Melbourne's best on the day. However, the shallow or unsuccessful entry means with numbers flooding forward for North, Carlton can rush into a very open space up the other end, should it result there. With a clearing kick by Haynes, Wardlaw is misplaced, and Hewett bobs up at the right time. If Hewett isn't available, Curno's either going backwards, or Carlton's attack will end up shallower, as Carlton won't have anyone to chain themselves into the forward line. The Smalls will need to lead up at the ball sooner. That's if Curno isn't closed down due to a lack of option. Hewett, however, prevents this outcome, and it's a one-on-one in the forward line, which George can utilise kicking to his left, the advantage of Durden. Credit to him for actually delivering in this respect. And then another case of it in this example. Carlton switched the play and Hewett is all the way back at centre halfback. As the ball enters inside 50, Hewett is right up the top of the arc. And then obviously, the directive has been to close down North Melbourne at every opportunity, especially with Carlton's head up at this stage in the third quarter. The fumble is costly, and so is the inability to lock the ball in for North Melbourne. As the ball ends up in the pocket and gets redirected to the top of the square, Powell is trailing Hewett, and then he doesn't follow him into the contest. For where the ball spews out towards, this is highly damaging, with a ton of space at the back of the cluster of players. and only Carlton players benefiting from that. Hewett makes himself available, having circled around to complement Fogarty, who draws in their last bit of reinforcement, and Hewett kicks an impressive goal across the body. He just knows a way of getting involved. And we've got one more example, which just shows how fundamentally strong George is, keeping things simple. It starts with a simple reading of the ruck tap, as he is well positioned. Beyond that, it's quite ridiculous that he isn't getting marked as he enters forward 50. And tracking the contest, he picks up the footy cleanly on the half volley and hits Jesse Motlop on the way through, so he can attack the space required to get the cleanest possible shot he can be afforded, given the situation, which nearly results in the most optimal of outcomes. George really isn't afraid to put his head over the football, and he capitalizes on a lack of discipline from the opposition. Easy example of that is here, where he is most reactive as he collects a ground ball and is rewarded as a kicking endangered free kick is adjudicated. But even if it wasn't, with the way he's operating cleanliness-wise, with the numbers drawn, a handball to Cripps would be accessible should this play be allowed to continue, such as the impact of Hewett. And from this, whilst North Melbourne hold up structurally for a couple of sequences, it's locked in Carlton's forward half, and that typical chaos ball game plan, which has Carlton at their best, that comes into play as Carlton kick a goal, and North Melbourne fans lose their shit. In brackets, justifiably. Ultimately, George Hewett is the Carlton embodiment of when you keep things simple, good things happen. Fundamentally, he is sound in almost every facet. He's always available, quite literally with how durable he is, but also with how present and involved he is in game, helping out his teammates. He doesn't do anything flashy or unworldly, but that is why he has been and will continue to fall under the radar of football fans. On that, here's a fun fact for you. George Hewett has played 185 games and polled only 18 Brownlow votes. I'll say there should be a few more headed his way, at least so far this season. What do you think? Has George been this year's best for the Blues? Is saying he's an All-Australian candidate for the first 6 weeks of the season a rogue shout? Have your say. I look forward to reading it. Talk to you in the next Carlton analysis, but until then, stay safe and bye for now.